Welcome to Pause for the Truth, where you can sit back, relax, and hear an honest dialogue about health, wealth, legal, and social issues. The hosts are Dr. Rogers Kane, family practice physician, and Jocelyn Turner, health education consultant, with co hosts from the Northeast Florida Medical Society and its foundation. Stay tuned for the truth about matters affecting you and your family. We're here to tell you what's really going on and why. Good evening and welcome to Pause for the Truth. I am your co host, Jocelyn Turner. OMG, it is a hot day here in Northeast Florida. I mean, probably indicative of Jessica and I's outfit in terms of the arms are out or the guns are out. And if we are really wanting to be honest, but anywho, just a great day here in Northeast Florida. Before before starting the show and bringing in our guests, Dr. Kane and I would like to first tell you about someone, and Tyrone may want to chime in as well. Tell you about a legend here in Jacksonville in Northeast Florida who passed. He happened to be a guest on our show a few months ago. And as Dr. Kane and I was talking to Dr. Kane, I told Dr. Kane, having read or heard on the news that he was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma 9 months ago. It was less than 9 months ago that he was on our show. What a guy, Dr. Kane, to have come on the show, still fighting for people and educating people. What he was on talking about is the importance of voting. And of course, I am referring to Ben Frazier. What are your thoughts, Dr. Kane?
Well, actually, he was on there about 5 weeks ago, and I went back and looked at the show, and he joined us. He had went before the city council and spoke that same evening. He joined us from the back seat of his chauffeur car, actually a friend chauffeuring him around. He was very jovial at the time, and he is a missed figure, will be a missed figure for sure in our community because his outspoken voice for the the underserved, for the disparate, for those whom are for the minorities, for the various sexes, just an outspoken advocate for people of all color and everyone in the Jacksonville community. So we will miss him greatly, and hopefully you and Tyrone would pick up the mantle and move forward with it.
Now, see, I thought I was going to be able to not say anything, Miss Jocelyn. Yeah, I think there's oftentimes in our life we hear the statement that certain people or certain entities are a hard act to follow. And when we talk about that, Ben Frazier comes to mind, a tireless uh, trooper warrior for the things that he was most passionate about, and I truly, truly believe that he will be missed. I pray, like in all things, that God sends us a warrior with the same enthusiasm and passion as he.
Thank you, Dr. Kane and Tyrone. So, moving on to tonight's discussion, a very important one. As I began the show talking about how hot it is, I even posted on my Facebook page to check on seniors and your senior relatives as well as your neighbors, and don't leave children or pets or even your grandparents in the car while you go in for a few minutes to do whatever it is. Any amount of minutes is too long.
Yep.
And of course, stay hydrated. Tonight, we're fortunate to have Disaster Jen, but her name is Jennifer Sylvie, on again. She was our guest a little while back, not too far long ago. She has so
Yep.
much knowledge and really does a great job educating the community, going above and beyond what it is she's supposed to be doing at work. Welcome back, Jen. How are you this evening?
Thank you. I'm doing good, doing good. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm in the car because we had a early family dinner. Our little grandson turned 3 today.
Oh,
So
sweet.
he wanted Mexican. So they're just wrapping it up inside. And I said, well, I'm going to sit in the car and do this while they're getting everything cleaned up.
See what I mean? A real champion, no matter what, she's still trying to get out there and do her thing and educating people. So thank you so much, Jen, for taking time from your family. Also joining us is
Thank you.
Jessica Winberry. Jessica and I go way back. We were reminiscing. We were on the Safe Kids Committee because Jessica is with the Players Center for Child Health. How are you doing this evening, Jessica? And
I'm
welcome
doing
to
good.
the
I'm feeling
show.
I'm feeling a little lousy that I don't have a good nickname like Disaster Jen. So before
I
I come
know,
on
right?
next time, I need to have a good nickname. So, but other than that, I'm feeling the heat that you were talking about, Jocelyn, and needing a new nickname. So I'm good.
I know we all do. And, for those of you who are just tuning in, we're talking about summer safety for you and your family. But in all seriousness, it's extremely hot nowadays, if you have not noticed it. And we really
yeah.
need to check on those folks who may not be able to make the best decisions for themselves, or who may be, frail and need someone to check. Don't make the assumption that somebody else is checking in on them. How about you just go the extra mile to check in on those persons who are homebound, especially, to make sure that they are in a cool place and that they are staying hydrated. Before we begin with Jen and Jessica, Dr. Kane, I want to ask you, when we talk about staying hydrated, people always talk about, oh, I drink 4 bottles of water a day, or I drink 3 bottles, I drink one with breakfast, lunch, and dinner. What's the real scoop on how much water each individual should have a day?
Well, I mean, it is hot out there today. Today, at currently, it's about 96 degrees, but it feels like it's 109 because of the heat index. And that's basically, the heat index is what the actual temperature is, and then what it feels like to the human body. So, and part of that, that whole equation is keeping yourself hydrated, because your body will be losing body water, whether it's through breathing, whether it's through sweating, through a multitude of, and even urination, you losing some of your body water. So you got to keep up the body hydration. I try not to give too much of a technical answer, but my easy answer that I try to get most people to go with is, how about doing about a half an ounce of water for every pound you weigh? So if you weighed 100 pounds, give me at least 50 ounces of water a day. Okay. Now that's in a 24-hour period. And if you are participating in an activity where you're doing a lot of sweating and or some physical activities, you may want to increase that anywhere from 10 to 25% of what I just calculated. Now, granted, some people may get into 200 pounds there. Dr. Kane, that's 100 ounces of water a day. I am talking a 24-hour period. It's a rough estimate. I'd rather for you to do a little overshooting than undershooting, because undershooting that the proper level hydration is what can give you the heat stroke and get you in someone's emergency room and urgent care. So just a rule of thumb, just a general rule of thumb, is a half an ounce per pound for pound of body weight.
That's pretty easy. Jen, did you want to say something?
So, if we think about sometimes even just walking out to the mailbox, or if we're walking to catch a ride, or going outside to let the dog out, you still can lose a lot of, let's say, sweat, or, those electrolytes. So, I agree, drinking enough water is going to be key. If you have kids out there that are playing soccer, that are, being outside with outside activities, you want water, or you want like a G2 or a G0 that doesn't have the sugar, but it has those electrolytes, that those active kids, or, even adults who get out there and play baseball, team baseball, that you need that water and those G2 or G0 to replace those electrolytes.
I will like to make sure we do appreciate the fact that in a lot of our community, we may have people that are sickle cell or sickle cell trait, that those guys have require a little extra um, uh, watering as well. So make sure that they
Yep.
stay well hydrated. Otherwise, you can get some sickle cell
100%.
crisis.
And
Yeah, 100%. Those who suffer from sickle cell, a lot of that pain and a lot of what they feel is because what we found is that the body is not hydrated. So keeping
And again, that's for the sickle cell trait as well.
Gotcha. So now let's talk about the 4th of July is next week. Everybody's making all sorts of plans, and they're not even waiting until the 4th. They're actually, the festivities are probably going to start on Friday. I mean, truth be told, because we live in Florida, we have a lot of beaches, we have a lot of swimming pools. So as people are getting out, we may have Uncle Joe, who might be the griller and out doing the grilling. So when we talk about summer safety, there are so many aspects to that. Let's first start talking about heat safety. We talk about heat safety. I know you all sent us some great handouts and things that we can put on our website after the show. And hopefully Tyrone can cue them up as we start talking about them. But let's talk about heat stroke and heat stress, because again, as you all just, Dr. Kane and Jen just mentioned, we really have to make sure we stay hydrated, but understanding how you may go out for a prolonged period of time and haven't had enough. Are there any particular signs or symptoms to let you know, oh my goodness, things are going south here. I need to get some water in me. Go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, so I'll tell you that our bodies are these amazing creatures because it will give us signs and symptoms. I think about our construction workers or guys up on, doing roofing, or somebody working in their attic, first responders, police officers, hospital security. You think about them, and some of the signs is they might feel a little dizzy. They might get a little confused. It's always good to have, and what I like to call my brother's keeper, looking out for one another. Hey, take a break, go get in a nice, cool, shady area. And, take a break, take off that hard hat or that hat, because heat stays in here under your armpits, between your legs. And what you want to do is take off those socks, because the heat will come out your feet as well. Is, make sure that you're taking plenty of breaks. But it's that confusion, it's that thirst, the sleepiness. And then what really is scary is that if you're working outside, because right now my temperature gauge says 101 and you're not sweating. So that's when you're in the bing, 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 bing. That's a dangerous point. And if you first start showing those signs, again, get in a cool area, start taking off those things, get something to drink. And then if you're still not getting cooled down, or if you're looking at someone and they just don't look well, they're red but not sweating, they're confused, they maybe have short of breath, the very thing you want to do is call 911, because just like that, they can go into a heat stroke, and that's not good for the body.
And I'm glad you named all the different professions, because I didn't think about the roofer, the construction worker, all those people. And I even read recently where somebody was in their attic and the door closed on them by mistake and they were stuck there. Can you imagine how, oh my God, that was just probably horrible, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so those places that you typically are going into alone, during these times, you probably want to notify someone where you are. So just in case they don't hear from you.
Yep.
And Jessica, I have to bring up in this case, the hot car situation, because Dr. Kane and I were talking a little while ago, and for the life of me, I don't understand it, and I'm not judging. But when people say, put your purse and your cell phone in the back seat to remember your child, that's something to me. Like, you'll remember your purse and your cell phone, but you have to have that kind of reminder to remember your child. And Jen, I'm sure, has the air conditioner on in her car, and it's still registering 101. So Jessica, tell me about, have we had any cases that you know of in Jacksonville this year of any children who were left in a hot car?
So we definitely have had times that children have been left in hot cars, but haven't died in Jacksonville. We have lost 8 children nationally from being left alone in a hot car. 4 of those 8 have been in Florida. So we are half of the numbers, unfortunately, for Florida deaths. And, just like you said, Jocelyn, I mean, I struggle with this sometimes too, and just thinking, how does someone forget their child in the car? And, I just always like to remind families, most people don't wake up in the morning and think, today I'm going to leave my child in the car and they're going to lose their life. Or today I'm going to miss that my child gets out the back door and drowns in the pool. But these things happen over and over again. So, the best thing, in most of these things that we're talking about today, what I always like to remind people is all of these things are really preventable. All of these injuries are preventable with just a little bit of additional information. And so, when we're thinking about kids being in a car, it happens a couple different ways. Oftentimes when I read through the deaths that happened in Florida, one of them was a mom rushing to church, and she had a portion of the service that she was doing, and she thought someone from the congregation grabbed the baby from the car, and they didn't.
Oh.
And she arrived back to the car 3 hours later, and the baby was in the car. So anytime, we live in a society now where, our routines are changing all the time, and that really does increase the risk that someone is getting forgotten in the car. So as silly as it sounds, I don't think I'm one step away from my phone. Most people are, never get out of the car and go to work all day long without remembering their phone. So no matter what it takes, do those reminders. And then we see a lot of times our toddler age kids are getting back into the car. So those 2, 3, 4-year-olds, they're not always getting left in the car, but they forgot something in the car. So get in the habit of locking your doors, locking everything so that kids cannot get back into the car and get stuck in there and die. And, just like we're talking about dehydration and overheating, our little ones can dehydrate and overheat a little bit more quickly than we can when we're, strong, healthy adults, because they are so small and they're a little bit more vulnerable. So it doesn't take long, and our car can heat up about 20 degrees within 10 minutes. So if Jen had been in here for the amount of time we've been on this call, she'd be sitting in a 130-degree car at this point.
Oh, yeah.
So, just always remember and just set up as many reminders as you possibly can, especially when we have those changes in situations.
And
Jessica,
just as a
I'll tell you.
reminder, go ahead, Jennifer.
Sorry, Dr. K. I was about to say, I was a young mother with my oldest daughter. She's over 30 now, but I remember a young new mom. I'm driving to work. I had so much going on. I pull into the hospital because I was working at the hospital at that time. And she goes, "Mom, I go to work with you today." And I'm like, oh my gosh, I completely forgot she was in the car. And my first thought was, what if I would have got out and went into work? Yep. And that was 30 years ago. And I still do it now. I put my purse in the back seat just in case I have the grandkids or anybody, my dog, back there. But I learned a huge lesson. And if it wasn't for her going, Mom,
you're a good mom that is going to, that's getting to work. And, these things just unfortunately happen. And, and as I always remind families, with these types of tragedies, we can't turn the clock back. You can't just take back that 1 hour that before you remembered or before you noticed the child was missing. So, just always setting anything in place, because we're all human. We're all busy. We're all trying to do the best we can. And that's how these, injuries happen. That's how these accidents kind of happen.
Well, I was just going to say, because everyone uses their cell phone these days and they're busy, you're always looking for the cell phone. Put it in the back seat with your kid and just leave it back there. Because I guarantee you, most of us, when we get into work, we start, where's my phone? At least that'll give you that'll give you kind of a reminder to go back and check and see about the phone.
That's right.
In the car, and then it's like, I forgot my kid.
Yeah, and it happens. I mean, we all need reminders.
The only other thing I was going to bring up, and it may come up, in terms of you guys having some slides, because you have some excellent slides that I've seen so far, is that just remember your pets will even heat, because a lot of people treat their pets as if that's their kids. Just remember, they got a fur coat on. Imagine you being in a hot car with a fur coat. So you're at 119 degrees, but you got a thick fur coat on. So now that's like 139, 150 degrees. So just keep that in mind when you're trying to keep the car cool for your pets and so on and so on.
And even the pets, so many people have their pets outdoors chained to a tree or to the fence or whatever, and there's not enough water in it. It's just too hot nowadays. So let's transition. I'm gonna pivot now, because I know, the grocery stores are going to be full of hot dogs and hamburgers this weekend, right? And ribs and chicken, and Uncle Joe or whoever your griller is in your house, speaking of heat safety, Tyrone, right, is going to be out grilling.
I'm coming over. When is? I didn't get the invite for this. Tyrone's grilling.
Let's go to the grill master's house.
So, he had to come from behind the scenes.
Yes, I did.
Here's my invite. I hope. Here's my invite.
I think it's unfair to have that conversation without letting our viewers know what transpired or what made this so. And I will say, as a disclaimer, there's no evidence to support either way.
I might have called him the grill master,
Before we got on air.
So let's talk about grill safety. What are some pointers that you can give someone as they are preparing to fire up the grill this weekend?
So some of the things you want to think about is the type of grill you have, right? Is it gas or propane or charcoal, right? But also think about where you're going to be putting this grill. You don't want to take this propane or gas grill and put it on your patio upstairs in your upstairs apartment, right? Because if you go to, and I've responded as a firefighter, responded many times to apartment fires that were started by grills on an upstairs patio. Because you go to put the lighter fluid on it, it goes up and it catches the outside patio on fire. But that's also true for your house. You want to make sure that grill, whatever type it is well away from your house or overhanging eaves. You want to make sure that the kids don't have a quick access to it so they can get in there and play with it. You have these grill masters who take the whole bottle of lighter fluid and squirt it on there. And when they squirt it on there, because it's already lit, baby, the lighter fluid falls on the ground, falls on their clothes, and guess what? They catch fire. Mm-hmm. So, keep it away from kids, keep it. And so the other thing is keeping it clean. It's not a cast iron, pot that we like to cook over and over again. You have to clean those, that part of the grill, because that buildup can also start a fire. And I actually watched a really good podcast the other day where this guy was cleaning his grill and it had the bristles of the brush. Well, it got caught in some of the buildup. He put his hamburger meat on that. He swallowed the bristle that was attached to the buildup, and he almost died from it because it got caught in his throat. So, knowing those good safety tips. And then the biggest thing, if you are using propane, you always want to make sure that you turn it completely off. You don't want it seeping out. You don't want it leaking out. So you constantly want to make sure that usually it comes with a gauge. And so you want to make sure that you have it completely off and it's not leaking in any way.
Yeah, Jennifer, I saw a story. I saw something like that happen where they left some of the, excuse me, the wire brush cleaning on the grill. Meat got stuck in someone's steak. They ate it, and for days they're going back and forth complaining about throat and issues. And it wound up being because a piece of the wire was stuck on there. Not to mention, a lot of people think, well, I've heard that many times in our older cooks that, well, this fire kill all the germs. No.
No.
Not necessarily true.
Well, it's too.
No.
I wish I had heard this a few years ago because I didn't even think about this, but we would clean our grill with a wire brush and some of the drippings would come through and our dog got a hold of it and
Yep.
got a piece of the wire stuck in his throat. We ended up at the emergency vet with him, which is not a cheap
Oh,
bill.
no.
Right.
Yep.
And he had a piece of the wire piece stuck in his throat and they had to take it out. So it really, I mean, those things, and I feel like, you know, you can kind of see when that brush is starting to break down a little bit. So it's probably
Yep.
one of those things that you just have to replace periodically to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Yeah,
would
they
like to
also
men-
make different types of brushes, so it
Right.
doesn't have the bristles on it.
And I'll also like to make mention, even though it doesn't occur as much during the summer, but we do like to do those fry those turkeys.
Oh,
And when you put them in those fryers and you get that big splash of fire going up and, you know, and the oils are catching on fire, that is one potential hazard that very hard.
huge.
And of course, Jennifer and Jessica, both you guys know, always have a fire extinguisher.
Yes.
available.
That was going to
Always.
be my next. That was going to be my next one. You know, one, don't store all the hamburger buns right there on your hot grill, but
Right.
have a fire extinguisher. And honestly, you know, the scary thing is like water. Like you don't want to throw water on a gas fire, right? A
Right.
gas grill, because that's going to make it even worse.
Mm.
You know, it will just actually cause more harm than good, and the fire will spread even faster. You
Yeah.
know,
And I
having a good fire extinguisher within an arm's reach is the biggest tip I can give people.
Yep.
And I think it's important too, in all of that, you know, keep your kids away when you're cooking, you know, keep them, you need to have kind of a free zone around either, whether you're cooking in your kitchen or using your grill, you know, it's not a place to be playing around. And most times you've got kids around there wanting to play. So they need to be well away from that area when someone's cooking, because just like, you know, just like Dr. Kane mentioned there, you know, that oil comes flying up. Nobody plans on getting burned or burning their face or burning their chest, but that's how those things happen.
Yeah. We
If you're
see it all
just
the time during holidays.
Yep.
Yeah. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about summer safety for you and your family. If you have questions of our guests, as you can tell, they're very knowledgeable and passionate. Dial in now, 888-669-1280. Because when it comes to summer safety, there are so many aspects to it that we don't think about. As Jessica said, when you wake up in the morning, you don't expect that something's going to happen that is going to compromise your health or the health of your family throughout the day. So we wanted to share with you some safety tips. Now let's transition and talk about, for those folks who are out on the golf cart. And I've seen stories of children who've gone on golf carts and have gotten in, lost control of them. Tell me about golf cart safety.
Okay, so this is an area that we've really seen an increase in our children's hospital. So I work for Wolfson Children's Hospital, and this is an area that we've really seen a huge percentage increase in the injuries related to, I want to say, families using golf carts, but a lot of times it's just kids on their own using the golf cart. So remember, golf carts are designed to be used on the golf course. And so what we're seeing a lot of times is we're seeing a lot of these golf communities where golf carts are being used as cars are. If we're using them like cars, they need to be updated to where they've got seat belts and mirrors and all the things that would help protect us more so than, without having those things. Unfortunately, what we see a lot is some really terrible injuries. So these aren't just small scrapes and bumps. Normally what happens is we either have, an adult driving and you've got a child that's light and we turn a corner, and since nothing's holding them in, they tend to go flying off. And what do? Most of the time is typically the way they fall is they fall head first and they hit their head. And so we've seen a lot of really traumatic brain injuries. We have seen deaths from golf cart injuries. And then oftentimes, we see that kids are just using these with their friends. And, best intentions, I don't think anybody, initially when this became such a popular thing in neighborhoods, I don't think that anyone really saw the dangers in this. But I can promise you from the hospital standpoint, we are seeing the dangers of using these golf carts without adult supervision, without them being, with seatbelts on them, and kids are driving them and they don't have a driver's license. They don't really know how to drive yet. And as we're mentioning golf carts, I would really, kind of be remiss in not including in that also our, use of ATVs. So those of us that live out in these fun rural areas and you get to get on your four-wheelers and things like that, we see a lot of injuries with those too, because we've got kids driving on more adult size ATVs and they don't have the arm range to turn those properly. And, oftentimes, we're not using helmets and things. And so we're seeing a lot of injuries with, a lot of head injuries with these things. So just remember all of these, fun things that we can do. We need to make sure that we're using all the safety pieces that go with it. So whether it's helmets or we're getting seat belts on the golf carts, and, really parents, I think it's really something to think about. We shouldn't have unlicensed drivers driving golf carts because they don't have those skills yet. And this is driving something that goes 20, maybe 25 miles per hour sometimes. So, really making sure that we're using a lot of caution around these types of things while having fun, of course.
Jennifer, I couldn't agree with you more. I've been in some of these neighborhoods where you see a lot of, I'm sorry, Jessica.
That's okay.
That's Tyrone echoing in my ear.
Tyrone put the bug in our ear.
Yeah,
Jennifer and Jessica, we're making it really hard.
But I couldn't agree with you more, because if these kids if you don't trust them to drive your car, okay, this is a motorized vehicle. They're selling these motorized vehicles as if they're playthings in various locations. And these kids, I drive through the neighborhood and I see, I'm trying to be sure they don't pull out in front of me. Some of them, they're driving their dusk and they don't have lights on, not adequate lights. It's just not safe at all. So even though that might not be a whole lot of us that are seeing that, there's still a significant injury that I'm not in urgent care. I haven't done urgent care for a couple of years, but I can only imagine, since the increase in these vehicles, motorized vehicles, that we're seeing a whole lot of injuries on that.
And I think, as you're saying, like, there are some communities that see more of these golf carts and you have to live in a certain area for ATVs, but most adolescent children have access to, an e-bike or a motorized skateboard. So the same principle applies there. We're getting kids on something that, goes 20 to 25 miles per hour. And you see those things everywhere now. You can get somewhere faster. A lot of times they're not, they're not really walking around. They're not really wearing helmets and things like that because they're a little bit older. And, they get thrown from those things and they're typically, hitting their heads.
Yeah. So I'll just add with that, we're also a level 1 trauma center, and we see an increased amount of injuries during the summer, during like when school is off. And golf carts are made for, there's a person in each seat. And we find that, if the adolescent or even an adult is driving and there are 6 people on this golf cart that typically only fits 2, and they hit a bump or the cars around them are not paying attention, that also increases their chances of getting involved in a vehicle accident. We see it on a large amount. And I think, if you go back and you talk about, if those golf carts have a blinker, have lights, have front lights on it, brake lights on it, and only drive in areas where golf carts are allowed. They're not allowed in the roads. They're not allowed. But even in these golf cart type communities, we're seeing accidents happen because, just like you both said, these kids aren't mature enough in their driving experience to understand fully the rules of the road.
And I think it's one of those things that sometimes in all of these injury areas that we're thinking about here, sometimes we give a little bit more thought that our kids, this is not dangerous, this isn't a big deal, and think that they maybe know more. But think back to when you were 13 or 14 years old. I mean, learning how to step on the gas of your vehicle, everyone is shocked. So, I think oftentimes we just need to kind of think about what have they learned yet? Have they learned the skills that are required for looking behind you to see if a car is coming? And that's even on your bicycle, like even when we're talking about, golf carts and things, but we see these injuries, just kids riding their bikes. I mean, it takes a long time to build up the skills to be able to pay attention to all of your surroundings. And that's why it's so important. We always want to make sure that adults are with kids and adolescents until they've learned and perfected some of the skills that are involved with looking for those dangers. It's not easy. It's a learning.
You mentioned about bike helmets, though. Is there a one size fit all when it comes to bike helmets, or do you have to really, some people head like mine might be a little larger than yours. So should I actually try bike helmet on to make sure it fits? And even with children, the same with children?
Yep. Jocelyn, that's a great question. That's something that we do provide in the center. We have, I'm actually a certified helmet trainer for the state of Florida. And as silly as it sounds, there's quite a science to it. Just like anything, if we're not using it correctly, it's probably not going to work the way we want it to. Installing a car seat, if you just go to the gym and stand at the gym, you're not really getting any exercise. So we need to be using these things correctly. So, helmets, we always want a helmet to kind of be the smallest that fits the child, not bigger. So we don't want to go, let's get a helmet that's going to last us for 10 years and it's too big for the child. So, when we are fitting a helmet, it needs to be snug, level, and stable. So oftentimes when I see kids wearing helmets, the helmet's like way back here. So that whole front part of the brain is exposed to injury. Wow. So it needs to be no more than a couple fingers from the eyebrow to the top of the helmet. And it should be snug enough, which I don't oftentimes see, that when a child shakes their head yes or no or moves their head around, it shouldn't easily be moving. Because obviously if we fall off our bike or if God forbid are struck by a vehicle, we want that helmet to stay there. A properly fit helmet can reduce the risk of that head injury by about 85%. So it is absolutely, proven that if we've got a helmet on, we really will reduce that risk of injury. So, we can certainly help families in making sure that they've got their helmets fit properly. And we oftentimes provide helmets to families that may need helmets. So, we always want to see kids and adults. Adults are injured all the time as well. Making sure they've got a properly fit helmet and the correct helmet. So what you wear on a skateboard is different than what you're going to wear on a bike versus what you're going to wear on a motorized piece of equipment. So always a good idea to do some research. And that goes along with the cost of what you're buying. If you're buying a bike, you're buying a motorized skateboard, the cost of the helmet needs to be part of that activity.
So you mentioned that the Players Center for Child Health provides bike helmets. Is that for those families who can't afford it? How do they get in touch with you all there at the Players Center?
Yeah, so we do it several different ways. Sometimes we're out at community events, and we do helmet fittings there. Or families can call us if they need a helmet. It's just oftentimes while supplies last, but we typically have helmets in supply. We need to see kids. And so we teach the parents or we teach the kids how to make sure they know how to fit the helmet. So they can give us a call and we can see, kind of on a case-by-case scenario, if we've got the helmets that would be provided. We do not have helmets for motorized equipment, but more so for someone that's riding their bike or their skateboard or their scooter or something of that nature.
So I was not aware that I guess I should have been, but not as aware as I should have been about the different types of helmets, needed for this activity versus that activity versus a different activity. Yeah, so that's interesting to know.
And even you think about, Jessica, excuse me, what I was thinking about as you were even talking, when relatives are visiting, kids are visiting other homes, right? So if a child comes to my home, and I have a child who has a helmet, little Johnny comes and doesn't have a helmet. People do it all the time. Well, let him wear your helmet. Let him wear your sister's helmet. But it might not be the proper fit of a helmet. So it is so important to, as you're planning your trips or your sleepovers, that you take all the things that those children are going to need to make that time spent with them safe. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about summer safety. because so many activities are happening during the summer. You know, we talked about grill safety, we talked about golf cart safety, water safety, even though, by the way, I haven't gotten to pool and beach because I want that to be our next to last topic as we go down the list of summer safety tips. But I want to talk real quickly because one of you mentioned something about autism spectrum safety. What is that all about?
Yeah. Go ahead, Jessica, and then I can add to it too.
Sure, sure. So I sent along a slide that you guys can share now or at some other point, but I certainly am not an expert in children with autism, but as it relates to injuries, we tend to see that unfortunately, sometimes children with autism can have an increased risk of some injuries. So especially as it relates to water safety, we tend to see a lot of children with autism, if they pass, a lot of times it's due to drowning. And so, I think it's really important to just mention this when we think about, safety, that sometimes there are some different circumstances that can be involved that can really pose an extra challenge. We do car seat checks and we do all kinds of things. And when families come and they do have a child with autism, you can see that sometimes they can get away quickly. And so they can tend to be at higher risk for different injuries. And so drowning is definitely one of those. So we always want to make sure we've got a good plan. And so putting things in place, and this is for any child, we want to have layers of protection. So if your child gets out of the house, we want to have door alarms, window alarms, additional locks, safety around if we've got a pool. But, oftentimes when we think about some of these things, we lose children in places that we wouldn't go, retention ponds. You're not going to find me swimming in a retention pond. But a child that doesn't know the difference between a retention pond and another body of water that they've swam in before is not going to know the difference. And so, I think it's just important for people to recognize that, if we see somebody out roaming around and it's a child, we just need to make sure that we're asking some questions and making sure we're keeping that child safe, because oftentimes they can find something that's going to put them in danger. Jennifer, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so I'll definitely agree. With autism or adults with autism, they are attracted to water. And I know we're going to talk about pool safety in a few minutes, but I 100%, you took what I was going to say. It's just having all of those measures in place and almost like a duplicate, because is the door alarm going off or the pool gate alarm going off? Summertime is supposed to be fun for children and we want them to make memories. That's what this is about. Families making memories. But when you're making those memories, you have to have those plans in place that make sure that somebody is always watching the kids. That I'm going to tell you that we did a bicycle rodeo a couple years ago and someone said, hey, just use this helmet. And we turned around and the kid fell, the helmet went this way. And he actually got a head injury from falling, and he wasn't even going fast. He got on the bike and fell completely down, and it's how he fell and where he fell. So, but I love that slide. That is a great slide.
Yeah, very nice. And knowing, I'm sorry, Jessica, I just have to say this, knowing your friend, knowing as much as you can about your friends' playmates before they come over, because you may not know that children have specific illnesses or whatever the case may be. And we cannot make an assumption just because little Johnny is cute and your child's friend. You have to know as much as you can about those children so that you'll know and even share with the parents as you are allowing your child to go and visit. Here are some extra things that you may need to know about my child that that you did not know. Unfortunately, because I remember when I was teaching parenting classes, yes, that was funny to people because I'm not a parent, right? That I taught parenting. But people said, talked about when their child almost drowned in the bathtub, right? they went to answer the phone, the phone that was on the wall. We didn't have the cell phones back in the day, so the phone on the
Yep.
wall, or they had something on the stove, and got
Yeah.
distractions. So let's talk about, we live in Florida, and for those of you, we do have folks who are chiming in other places. And I would also like to ask both of you, as you answer the next few questions and anything that we've talked about so far, because Dr. Kane is a member of the Northeast Florida Medical Society. So several of the members might be listening as well, other physicians. So let's talk about water safety. We large bodies of water. I remember Jessica, when I used to come to the Safe Kids meeting, we talked about that person who's the designated person to keep an eye on the children while the other parents might be distracted doing other things. What do we call that person?
A water watcher.
Water watcher. That's
Yep.
it. So let's talk about, people are making plans for the weekend, right? They're either going to the pool, they're going to the beach. So let's talk about pool safety first. And then,
I
by the way,
always,
any tips that you can give any of the physicians who might be listening as they're talking to their clients as well, their patients.
yeah. So some of the things is spot on what you just said. You need one person to be that spotter. This person is not playing games. This person is not indulging in adult beverages, going to fix people's plates. They're not cooking on the grill. You need a designated person watching every single child or person in that pool. We have had, I think, 3 days and like 10 days, we had 3 teens that drowned. And that is a scary thing. I remember one of my first calls as a firefighter was a 2-year-old who, it was a family get together at a pool party, and they couldn't find the toddler, and the toddler was at the bottom of the pool. So some of the things you want to have in place for pool safety is the spotter. You want to have alarms set up around the pool so that, because little ones, curious ones, little ninjas, they will break in and try and get to that pool. They'll throw their ball in there, even for our pet safety as well. You don't want them to fall in there. So having a gate around there with an alarm, it's always good when we can make sure that we get our kids into swim lessons so that they understand, if they go under, how to paddle back up. And then one of the other biggest things is have some safety devices that if we need to throw one in, we can, but also knowing CPR. Because, making that 911 call and delivering CPR to a child or to a person who's in that pool who is now unresponsive. Pools are supposed to be fun, but you have to have safety measures in place to protect everybody.
Can't agree more. Have a pool, a pool watcher. Their job is to watch that pool and what goes on. Not distracted by someone else yelling over here. You can have somebody else to watch the kids outside the pool, but pool watchers.
And do you wear these safety devices, Jessica? Do you typically put those, either of you, on children, even in a swimming pool versus the ocean, for example, going to the beach?
So good question. There's a little bit of conversation about that. I will touch on, is one type of flotation device that is approved by the U.S. Coast Guard that is the only thing that's considered a flotation device. So I see all the time, parents using those little inflatable arm swimmies that go on their arms. I can't caution you enough about the dangers with those things. They don't have any size requirements, so they can go on the same arm of a 1-year-old as they can a 7-year-old. I can promise you they don't fit the same way, and they slip off.
Right.
So if we're using Coast Guard approved flotation devices, and I know we don't have enough time to go through this, but they have several different types. Some are used more so if you're way offshore and you're expecting that rescue would take a very long time, you might use one type of life jacket. When we are in a pool with a small child, we don't always want them to think they can swim if they don't know how to swim, so there's no substitute for adult supervision. And, I know Jennifer and Dr. Kane kind of mentioned this already, but Drowning happens all the time. And I hate to say it, but it is the number one killer of children between the ages of 1 and 4, and the second leading cause of death in older children. So this is not a small concern. This is a huge concern. And I don't think when I interact with families that have lost a child, they didn't know this. They didn't know that this was the number one cause of death of children in their age. And drowning is silent. We tend to think that kids are going to be thrashing around or making noise or calling for help. This happens when adults, and good adults, even good swimmers, are all around. So if you are going to use, a Coast Guard approved flotation device, it's always recommended to make sure that you get in the water and see how your child responds to that before you are counting on that using it. There's still no substitute for that adult supervision. And remember, pools are different than lakes, are different than rivers, are different than oceans. So if we put our child into a pool with a Coast Guard approved flotation device, that's not going to be the same as when they get into the ocean and get knocked down by a wave. So we always want to make sure that, when kids don't know how to swim, Jennifer mentioned it, those swim lessons, the American Academy of Pediatrics strongly recommends swim lessons starting at the age of 1, because it is the number one killer of children. And so, I hear parents all the time saying, oh, my kid can kind of swim. There is no such thing as kind of knows how to swim. There are swimmers, and then there are some that are still learning. And so, it's super important to make sure your kids are getting swim lessons and remembering, one of the beautiful things of living in Florida is that we have water around us everywhere. Anyone that drove home from work today probably saw some type of body of water, whether it was a retention pond or a lake or a river. And so, it's super important for our kids in our community to get those swim lessons.
Are there options for people who might not be able to afford swim lessons? I know the city has swimming pools that people probably use because they're in their neighborhoods. But Jessica, do you know of any resources for families?
So I believe, and I could not confirm this, but I know in the past the city has offered swim lessons. So other organizations like the YMCA, that can be a fluctuating cost. Mm-hmm. And so I never recommend one place over another. It's just what's going to be most convenient that you can follow through with the swim lesson. So, you can sign up for swim lessons, but if you only go to one of them, your child is not going to know how to swim. So I think, checking with the city and checking with the YMCA, typically those locations are really well spread throughout our community so that, that transportation is close by. And then I know there are a lot of organizations that offer scholarships. And so, it never hurts to call a location and ask, I have X amount of funds for swim lessons. Is there anything you can do for me?
And we always Google. By the way, Jen, I want to talk about, since I said when we were getting started that you actually taught me hands-only CPR. Let's talk about that a few minutes, because people don't know. They always say, I don't want to have to I don't want to have to kiss somebody and give them CPR. Right?
That's there's some family members I ain't gonna put my lips on to do CPR. Come on now. So, but what we found is people are more apt to help someone, right, if they don't have to do that. And the best part about it is it's push hard and fast in the center of the chest. Don't worry about stopping. Don't worry about doing anything. Our lungs hold about 500 to 600 milliliters of oxygen, good, clean oxygen. So as we're compressing that chest, we're circulating that good oxygen through our brain and our vital organs. So, if someone is down and you call 911 because you want to, what I call bring the noise. You want to bring the noise. You want to bring fire rescue to you. And the best thing you can do is sit there and push hard and fast in the center of the chest. And don't stop. Don't stop. Get it. Don't stop till rescue taps you on your shoulder to say, hey, we're going to take over. That's how easy it is to save a life.
And people can actually sign up for, we're used to Googling things. So we need to Google swim lessons. We need to Google where we can get a hands-only CPR course, because fortunately there are nonprofit organizations, and even maybe your job may offer CPR. So just make sure that you do your homework. One other topic that was on the list before we wrap up the show that I want to mention is pedestrian safety. Is that a big deal during the summer where people are just walking out and about? I know when I go down to the beach, people are not paying attention and just crossing the street without looking.
Yeah. Yeah. Pedestrian safety. And, the summer months are always the months that we see more injuries happen. But, living in Florida and in a warmer climate, one of the benefits and, sometimes difficulties is we can be out all year long, riding our bikes and walking and running. If you live up in Maine, there's 6 months out of the year where you really can't be outside doing these things. And so, in our state, we can be out having access to water and riding and all those things. And so we do. I can't recall many mornings that I haven't woken up and heard about a pedestrian injury, whether it was an adult or whether it was a child. And so again, making sure that we're doing everything we can to be safest. So, we talked a little bit earlier about distractions and things. I mean, I don't want to count on a driver not texting while I'm riding my bike down the road. I want to be as safe as I can because I see it happen all the time. And so, this depiction that we just put up is just a reminder about visibility. And so, one of the things that we see happen a lot is that people just aren't seen. They are maybe crossing the street or maybe, walking on the side of the road if there's not a sidewalk there and they're just not visible. And so if you are somebody that, walks to work or, is outside, I mean, obviously it's better to be out on the streets walking around when it's light out because there's a better chance we're going to be able to be seen. But if we are, getting out there and it's dusk or getting darker, wear reflective clothing. I mean, you can be seen from so much further away if you've got something reflective. And remember, if you're going 60 miles per hour, 50 miles per hour, you can't stop at the quick stop. So if I don't see you until you're only 10 feet away, I don't have a great opportunity to stop before you would be struck.
Great point.
And using those crosswalks, so often, and my family gets on to me and picks on me all the time that I'm not going to cross unless we're at a crosswalk because that's what it's for. It gives you a countdown. It makes the cars stop. It gives you that extra layer, but you also need to be paying attention. Even though the little crosswalk says go, you need to also pay attention to make sure those cars are stopped. And being in the bike lane as well, again, people are too often busy changing clothes, putting on makeup on their cell phone, and they drift right over into the walkways and bike lanes.
Well, ladies, we've talked about a lot tonight. Thank you so much. I know our audience took some notes. I did. You just didn't see my piece of paper, but I actually was taking some notes as well. And you gave some great handouts that we're going to have available on our website. We are at the end of the show. It's at this time we'd like to give our guests an opportunity to share their final thoughts, anything that you wanted to mention and may not have had a chance to mention. I'm going to start with you, Jen, since you've been on before and you know the deal, the scoop. What are your final thoughts?
So quick final thoughts. Make memories. Have those memories with your families, with your friends, but also put safety first. Safety is everybody's responsibility. And we have to look out for each other. We have to have a plan in place to where if something happens, to call 911 and life-saving measures to help save a life. But have that fun and enjoy your family. Just have safeguards up.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I have to insert, Jen, just because where we go way back. When you talked about making a plan and looking at your name, Disaster Jen, we didn't even get into the preparation for hurricanes and storms and things. So we'll bring you back to talk about that. So Jessica, what are your final thoughts regarding tonight's topic? And anything you wanted to mention that we didn't talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely appreciate being here. And, I just want to remind parents and, my final thoughts are, don't be afraid to ask questions. We're not the only ones I hope, that are going to be interacting with our children. And so if your kid's going over to someone else's house, don't be afraid to ask if they've got firearms. Don't be afraid to ask how they make sure their kids are safe, if they've got water around, if there's any special circumstances, because we don't get redos on some of these big things that happen. And I have met way too many families that have lost a child and would do anything to have those few minutes back that they didn't ask the question or didn't have that safeguard in place. So don't be afraid to ask the questions to make sure that your kids are being safe all summer.
Yeah, and even talking about those pods of detergent and medication that may look
Oh yeah,
like
candy.
candy. Yeah, so there's just so many areas of safety that we didn't touch on. Thank you. Dr. Kane, what are your final thoughts?
I just want to thank these ladies for coming on and enlightening me, and I think in our audience as well, to so many unknown or not thought about activities and potential hazards that the summer holds for our kids and our grandkids, especially. My kids are adults, but the simplest stuff is walking down the street and making sure that they're observing the driver, like if we're driving, and making sure that they're looking out for their own safety and hazards of walking in the street. I also like to thank Jennifer in particular for notifying me how Luke Campbell is a life instructor in terms of don't stop, get it, get it.
Yes.
Never knew that fact. so thank
Look,
you, ladies, for joining us.
Learning fun.
Thank you, ladies, for joining us. And Miss Turner, you're on.
So tonight was power packed. A lot of tips, great information. If you wanted to take notes, or if you knew someone else who should have seen the show that may not have seen it, just go to our website, pauseforthetruth.com. We're going to post all the great handouts that the lady shared with us. And be safe. Have fun, be safe. As Jennifer said, plan on making memories, but make memories safe for your families. As Jessica said, those families who lost loved ones, they wish they could take back those couple of minutes to go that extra step. Ask the questions where your children are going. Make sure your old grandparents know how to, who sometimes seem to be a little lenient with their grandchildren versus their children, that they are also being safe with your children. And as always, thank you for tuning in to Pause for the Truth. Tune in next week. We're going to have a repeat show. I'm just going to go ahead and give you a heads up because it is the 4th of July and there's nothing you can say to me that make me believe you're going to be tuning in next week. So
that's fair.
Thank you for tuning in and join us.
Thank you.
And as usual, if you have any suggestions for future topics to our audience, please send us an email, info@pauseforthetruth.com, and share your thoughts and ideas on future topics. Have a great evening, everyone. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a safe 4th of July.
You too.
Thank you.
You.
Thank you, ladies. Good night.